Hi, my name is Kevin McDonald, and I'm declaring my independence. Independence from what? Why, negative thoughts and energy, of course. Chief among them, hate, division, and fear. You see, I know that we're all one, and together we can solve any problem, save our planet and each other. Please, join me as we come together as one and choose a better way to be. So now, let's begin with my independence report. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of my Independence Report. My name is Kevin McDonald. I'm your host today, and we've got a great show for you. But before we get into the show itself, I want to remind everybody that in order for us to continue to grow this channel and to touch more lives and to touch more people, if you like the content that you see here, and this is going to be a good example of the content coming up here, please subscribe to the channel so that it can continue to grow and people can join us and we can get a wider audience and all of those sorts of fun stuff. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for being here. It is March 4th, 2021. In the United States, it is a bit of a day of trepidation because of some political stuff that may or may not be going on today, but we shall see. But we're going to take us a break from that, and we're going to talk to a gentleman by the name of John Vespasian, and he is an author. He's written 11 books, and all of his books really are centered around the idea of rationality and rational thinking, rational living. And so with that, John, I'd like to welcome you to the program. How are you?
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, very nice. Can you explain to our audience, when you're talking about rationality, what do you mean?
So what I mean is that I'm trying to encourage readers, to encourage people to become a little bit more logical, more rational in their lives, to make better decisions. And the methodology I use is unusual because the whole purpose of my books, the 11 books, is to go through history, to go through hundreds of biographies. So every book covers about 25, 30 short biographies. And what I do is to try to learn from people who have been very successful or very unsuccessful, sometimes people who have made huge mistakes, to try to learn lessons that we can apply today. But there is a great difference in the type of lessons I propose from the dominant philosophy. What I'm trying to avoid is to emphasize emotions, because many people try to cheer themselves up just by repeating a mantra, by trying to say, I can do it, and there is not much behind. And what I'm trying to do in my books is to show practical strategies that anybody can implement, even if you are not super positive, even if you're not super extroverted. So I'm trying to have the kind of strategies that are waterproof, and that anybody can apply, even if you are going through a difficult situation, even if you are feeling temporarily low or depressed, you can still find examples in history of people going through very difficult situations and actually making, in the end, attaining a victory. And the approach that I call rational living is very much low-key. I'm not trying to cheer up people that are really going through difficult situations. I'm not trying to deny that some people are having, especially these days, very severe problems. What I'm trying to do is to show examples, practical examples of how to solve those problems.
Now, John, you've been writing for a while. You've got 11 books out. I'm curious to know, what's your passion? Where did this come from? When did you decide you wanted to write books about people?
Kevin, this comes out of sheer frustration. I have to say that I started to write books now, it's 11 years ago. And I've been reading books for decades. I'm a voracious reader. I read a lot of history, psychology, finance, marketing. So I read a lot for years and years. And at a certain point, I found difficult to find the kind of books I wanted to read. Very practical, very factual. And I started to write books that I could not find. A combination of my interest in history, in psychology, in business, in finance. So what I do in the books is try to present the wisdom I have acquired by reading for these decades, by living myself, by applying these principles. And I have to say, the way I started is really because I could not find the kind of books I wanted to read.
Oh, very cool. So you took the time to really figure out for yourself what would make your contribution to mankind, and that's what these 11 books are, right?
Yes, but I have to say that until you actually finish writing the book, it's difficult to put things together because what I do in every book, I try to cover a different aspect of rationality. For instance, one book is about how to reduce stress, another one about how to go through very difficult periods in your life. And I put together the story. So I found in my notes, I find maybe 20, 30, 40 stories that I really want to tell. But to integrate the stories into a consistent narrative, into a logical recommendation, this takes a lot of iterations. And sometimes I have to rewrite the book 4 or 5 times until the message is consistent.
John, are you there? John? Uh-oh. Well, it looks like he's still here, folks. So we are, by the way, we're talking with John Vespasian, and he has written 11 books, and we are in the middle of a conversation with him, and somehow he's not there anymore. Now, he is in the Netherlands, so it is, there he is.
Yes, I'm here, Kevin, yeah.
He's back. We were just discussing the fact that you were from in the Netherlands, and sometimes that's a long way to shout to get all the way to Seattle.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So in any event, so you've been writing for a long time, and the whole idea is to, as I understand it, you could not find the type of material you were looking for, and so rather than looking for somebody else's book, to the hell with it, I'll just write it myself.
Yes, that's the thing, and I also write backwards, which is many people will find surprising. But if you want to write a book, say about dogs, most people would just make an outline, and then they will spend months researching about dogs, and they will put a book together. I work backwards, so I read a lot of books, articles, blogs. I listen to podcasts constantly, and I make notes. So I have material already for the next maybe 10 books already. What is really difficult is to draw the precise material for each book and to put the thing together. But I gather the material before I write the book, not the other way around.
That's really good. Now, because of the titles of the book and what's in them, some folks may not, I know it's hard to believe, but some folks may not be aware of who you are. So we should go through some of the titles of what you can do, because there's a lot of information here on a lot of different topics, isn't there?
Yes, the book that sells the best, the title is The 10 Principles of Rational Living. And this book is from 2012. And what I've done in this book is to go through maybe 50 biographies, short biographies, and to come up with 10 principles that I think for most people are not self-evident. And they can, I think, improve your life consistently if you apply them. Although I understand that applying them is difficult. Let me just mention a couple of these principles, and I think they're interesting. I mean, intellectually. The first principle that I present in the book that is a thread that goes through most of the books is the following. If you want to do well in life and to try to prevent problems, you should think like an entrepreneur and not like a crusader. And this is totally unnatural for most people, because when people get to believe something and say, oh, I am convinced that this is true or whatever, they become very aggressive. They become sometimes even violent. Sometimes they even aggress against other people. They want to impose their ideas. And in history, when you look at successful people, this has always been a disaster. I mean, even if you are 100% right that things should be this particular way, and you feel that you're surrounded by people who don't understand anything, you should not start a crusade. You should not start a war. It's a complete waste of time trying to convince people to change their minds unless they are already curious and open. Is a waste of time. And the message of this particular chapter is that when you are right and people around you are wrong, and you're 100% sure, what you should try to do is to exploit your convictions, your ideas commercially. You should try to start a business, or to try to draw some commercial application of your truth. And this is the way, the only way in history where when ideas actually prevail. Violence doesn't work. It has never worked. It will never work in the future. You cannot really push people to act against their convictions. But if they see a product, or they see a service, a new service, and they see a benefit, and they see that people are using it and they're getting good results, you will make money and you will be vindicated in your truth. And I have to tell you, there are hundreds of examples in history where people are right. They're 100% right scientifically, commercially, but still they become crusaders. They fight against everybody, and they end up very, very badly.
That's very interesting, because I would like to consider my podcast to be a positive program that I'm trying to create something special and positive, but at the same time, I can't force anybody to listen. If they choose to, if the information provided herein is worth their time, they'll listen. If not, they won't. And I can't do anything about that, but I can still put it out there. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes, you should put it out there. You should try to promote it, to try to make it profitable, to grow as a business or as a professional. And this is the right way to do it. Understanding that many people are going to think that you're foolish, that you're wasting your time. Ignore them. Just focus on the business, to grow the business, to grow the ideas. And you see this now in this crisis. We're now in this COVID crisis worldwide, where people have completely different ideas about the situation. Some people think it's super serious, that everybody's going to die, that you should really be super careful. And other people, they don't see that it's so serious. They think, okay, well, we have a problem here, but we should just keep moving with our lives. We should not stop everything. And you see this kind of conflicting ideas. And the only way to find the solution is to leave people in different areas to do different things. You cannot impose yourself, I think, through violence and say, oh, everybody has to do this and that. Eventually, in history, when you have this kind of conflicts, which are really very different ideas about an event, the only thing that works is to have people doing different things in different areas, and then to see the results. And some people, in the end, they will say, well, they are right. They have different ideas, but they are doing very well. So I will change my mind. And this is what happens. You have to propose a service. You have to propose a product. You have to propose an example that people can actually relate to. You cannot impose your ideas because you only create unhappiness, and you only create basically resistance.
Now, you live in the Netherlands, correct?
Yeah, I live in the Netherlands.
And so I got to ask you, because you're from a whole different country, what do the people in the Netherlands think of the United States and our craziness these days?
In general, the idea of the U.S. in Europe overall is very, very positive. I think most people, at least maybe 60-70%, they have an extremely positive idea about the U.S. And when I say the U.S., I mean what is fundamentally American, which is innovation, freedom, self-reliance, these kind of attitudes that we identify with the idea of being American. In Europe, for most people, are extremely positive. So it's a different culture because we have different habits and different food and different hobbies and this kind of stuff. But in the end, the human values of independence, self-reliance, they have proven extremely successful in every culture. And many of us see the United States as a symbol for these values.
One of the things that I like about what you do is in addition to the books that you write, you also have blogs that you write. And the one that caught my eye, and I wanted to just pursue it with you for a second, because I think it's really cool, is the relentless pursuit of long-term goals will render short-term annoyances insignificant. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, this is something I wrote, I think it was 1 or 2 months ago, trying to address the depression and actually the discouragement you see these days with this COVID, these restrictions, these limitations that people have in their careers, in their private life. And it is very annoying. It's a situation that is very frustrating. It depends on different areas because it's not the same everywhere. But most people find it very frustrating. Some people become very depressed. And what I'm trying to present in this article is that these kind of restrictions that have taken place in history many times. Now we see it ourselves, but if you go back in history 100 years, 200 years, you have seen similar situations, not precisely with COVID, but with other restrictions. And all of them, eventually they were surmounted, and eventually the situation improved, and eventually the economy came back roaring, and people started to become very successful. But we have to look long term. When you're faced with this kind of hiccups in your career, in your life, you have to take it philosophically. And this is one of the other principles I present in the book, that you have to be able to deal with the hassles of life. And you are going to get all kinds of hassles in your health, in your business, and you have to take it philosophically. These ups and downs are normal. I think it's good to try to minimize them, but you will find them from time to time. There is no use going crazy. You have to say, okay, fine, I'm facing this problem. I'm trying to do the best I can in the circumstances. But I think it will not take long before we go back to a normal situation.
How do you, in your, I guess, in your personal life, and how do you in the professional life that you talk about, how do you keep people positive and keep them motivated? Because a lot of people lose motivation because it hasn't been successful, and they might be not doing as well as they'd like, and so they quit, or they lose their focus or whatever. How do you preach people to keep laser focused on what your goals are?
Yeah, I think the only way, the only convincing way to do that is preaching by example. You can spend the whole your life just telling people what to do. Nobody will listen. My experience is that very few people will listen. But if you preach by example and say, look, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and I have this objective, then people usually look and they say, well, it's interesting. Maybe I could do something similar. And precisely in these times where we have so many restrictions and we have, it's very difficult to travel, you have to find other goals or other activities that you can pursue in this situation. You are basically facing, today many people are facing downtime. They cannot really pursue their normal activities. So I think instead of watching TV or instead of going crazy, lamenting the situation, which it's not going to lead anywhere, try to use the time wisely, try to learn new skills. For instance, one of the things you can do, and I think especially if you're American, is to learn another language. Many people complain that they have no time to learn a second language. In this case, Spanish would be very useful. Now you are facing this situation where you cannot travel, you cannot really move around. Use the time to learn something, learn the second language, learn the new skill. Try to develop a marketing plan for your business. Use the time productively. And it's very difficult. It's almost impossible to get depressed if you are constantly taking initiative and constantly trying to improve your life.
So instead of saying, oh, woe is me, just keep powering through it, and you can succeed.
Yes, you need some creativity to be able to find productive activities. And this is a problem that many people don't know themselves. And this is something that we see in ancient Greece. And they say, oh, well, what's the key to happiness? What's the key to success? You have to know yourself. You have to know what you like. You have to know in which areas you want to develop. And then it will be very easy to find new skills, to find new interests, to meet new friends, to grow your career or to grow your interests. But you really have to have some introspection to understand your strong points. Whether you are a person who likes, I don't know, you want to be surrounded by people and you want to work in sales, or maybe you are introverted and you want to be a writer, or whatever. You have to know yourself. And once you know yourself, I think it's relatively easy to find outlets for your talents.
That's really cool, because a lot of us are, I guess some of us, John, are kind of like, well, I would love to be an author, and I have lots of ideas, but I don't know how to get started, don't know how to get published, and then they put all these obstacles in their way, and then they decide, well, gosh, I can't do that. What was it about you that you decided that you were going to do it anyway?
Well, I decided that it was going to be difficult because, writing a book, it takes a lot of work, especially if you want to edit it yourself. It's not just typing. It takes a lot of work. And what I did was to make a test. And I think for most people, when you're trying to learn a new skill, to enter a new business or wherever, you should make a test. And what I did was to take 4 weeks of holidays. I took 4 weeks and I wrote my first book in these 4 weeks. I worked 10 hours a day for 4 weeks. I wrote the first book. And then I proved that it was possible. I said, I can do it. But the problem, the book was crap, because then I have to rewrite it 6 times until it was good enough. But at least you get an idea whether you can do it or not. If you don't make a test and you say, okay, I'm going to take 2 weeks and I'm going to do this, or I'm going to learn this, or I'm going to go this way, unless you make a test, you don't even know if you like it. You don't even know if you can sustain it for years. Sometimes it's wise to make a test and just to give up, because they say, I really don't like this. It's very boring, or it's a waste of time. This is not, but you do a test and then you get the conviction whether you want to pursue this activity or not. And if the answer is no, well, that's too bad. Then you do something else. But I recommend people to take the trouble to make this small test, to see if they want to go in a certain direction, and then to get the answer, yes or no, and then forget about it or continue with it.
That's really is sound advice, because one of the things that in my broadcasting career that I've considered doing is doing voiceover work for people making books and voicing books and commercials and that sort of thing. And what I found is that's a lot of work and not necessarily a lot of pay, and you don't have a lot of control. So I kind of have put that on the back burner. I still do a little bit of it, but you're right. If it's not your passion, if it's not something that you can do, it's like you spent a month writing 10 hours a day, so you must have loved doing it.
Yes, I did. I made a lot of mistakes because I was disorganized. I didn't have a clear idea what was I doing. I was retyping many things. It was completely useless. So, okay, but the first time you make mistake, and every time I write a book, you learn to do it better. You learn to do it faster. I can read my books now. They flow. They are well written. They are tight. But you learn with practice. It's like playing a musical instrument, like learning a new language. At the beginning, it's a mess. If you try to speak Spanish and you know only a few words, nobody will understand you. But with time, with some effort, you get to master it, and you get to play guitar, and you get to speak Spanish, and you get to do whatever. This is how life works. And don't get discouraged because you make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. And one of the things that I underline in my books very, very strongly, you should always think in terms of a lifetime. I mean, you're not going to die tomorrow. You're not going to die next week. Normally, people are going to live for decades. If you're listening to your show, certainly most people would be still in their 30s, 40s, 50s. They're going to live for decades. There is plenty of time to develop a new career. There is plenty of time to build up new relationships. There is plenty of time to travel. There is plenty of time. Don't go crazy just because you fail a few times. What I do in my books is to present biographies of people who failed dozens of times. They went bankrupt. They became sick. They were in exile. And eventually they became very successful because they kept trying to do new things. They kept taking initiative. And this is one of the keys of success proven by history.
That's one of the difficult things, is that people have a tendency to quit when they're not successful. But the most successful people are the ones that have failed repeatedly until they get it down the way that they want it. Is that not true?
That's true. And every time they fail, they do something a little bit better.
Right.
And when you get someone in history who becomes a total disaster and basically he destroyed his life, it is because he could not quit. He could not stop doing something wrong. He kept doing it over and over again until the person died. And this motto you see so often, keep trying, keep trying, keep trying, I think is incomplete. I think keep improving, and keep doing better, not just doing always the same thing. And this reminds me of one of the biographies I recount in my books. One of the chapters of the latest book is devoted to Mozart. Mozart was a great musical genius, but he died very young because basically he destroyed his life. I mean, he was a genius. He could play different instruments. He was composing music in a very intense way. I mean, one after the other. But the guy was working 18 hours a day for years and years. He never took a holiday. He was barely making any money because he was teaching music, which was a waste of time because he was making peanuts. He could not really learn from the mistakes. He was a genius musician, but he was not able to focus on money making. If he could have taken a step back and say where I'm making money and where I'm losing money, he should have concentrated on writing opera, and he would have made a fortune. But instead of doing that, he was writing pieces for a burial for $20, and he was starving. So this is really a pattern you find in history. People who keep doing the same without any improvement eventually will collapse because they will not learn from their mistakes.
So continue to do so when you're, as an example, you're starting a business, and there's lots of pitfalls when you're starting a business, lots of things that can go wrong. But as you continue to go down that road, then you refine and continue. You're always working to refine your message, refine what you're doing, refine the product that you're offering, the marketing that you're offering, and continue to do that all the time, right?
Yes, I think for any new business, I mean, unless you start with millions and millions, but for any new business, when people are starting, I don't know any example in history where people who started the business, they knew exactly how to become successful, because it takes a lot of experimentation with products, with marketing strategies, with advertising, until you actually figure out what to sell exactly and how to sell it. And if you see companies in history, very rarely they hit success with the first product. They have to develop a product. The product fails. Then there is a version 2, version 3, and eventually they learn from the feedback from the market. They learn exactly which is the product that becomes successful or the service, and then they scale up and they become a big company. But you see this in writers, you see this in musicians, you see this in companies. You need to do a lot of trial and error at the beginning until you figure out a product or a marketing system that it is sustainable and is going to make you successful. And the learning curve can be very, very long in some areas because the market is not transparent. But if you keep trying and you keep learning, eventually it's just a matter of time to become successful.
As I'm looking at the list of your books, and there are lots of them. There are 11, and Becoming Unbreakable, Consistency, The Key to Permanent Stress Relief, The 10 Principles of Rational Living, Everything Fails, Try This. I was curious about the one that's I can't even say it. It's the amazing power of finding the right sequence of steps. Could you talk about that one a little bit?
Yeah, the title, I could not find the title I wanted, so I invented the word sequentiality. It comes from sequence, and I invented the word sequentiality. And the book is trying to convey the idea by presenting dozens of examples that when you're trying to do something, you're trying to do whatever, start a business or to get a girlfriend or I don't know, whatever, or recover your health, it's not only what you do, and it's not only how much effort you put, but it's the sequence, the steps you take, in which order you take the steps. And this is absolutely not self-evident, because some people they spend a huge amount of effort. I'm starting a business or I don't know, whatever, and they do not get great results. And this is because sometimes they're trying to take a step 5 before they take a step 1, without really thinking about the sequence, about the order of the steps. And this is very detrimental, because if you look at history and you look at examples of people, how they became wealthy, successful, famous, you see a pattern in the steps, and you can copy the steps if you pay attention. But it is not a good idea to reinvent the wheel. It's not a good idea to try to discover something that is already discovered. And if you look in history, you will find many examples that you can apply to your own life. Just to go back to the example we were mentioning, if you're starting a company, and it happens, I mean, this is one of the typical mistakes. People will spend a lot of time trying to figure out the good, perfect computer system, the perfect desk, the perfect secretary. And for most companies, this is irrelevant. The only thing that counts for your survival the first 2 or 3 years is sales. You have to focus on selling your stuff. You have to focus on finding an audience or finding customers and trying to find the right product for them. This is the only thing that counts in a business. And eventually, when you have this figured out, you can find the perfect secretary and the perfect computer and the perfect accounting software. But if you do the steps in the wrong order, and you spend a year or 2 years agonizing about the perfect staff or the perfect computer, you're basically wasting your time, because you are not following the right order in the steps. And this book is all about the sequence, trying to show in different professions, in different contexts, what is the right sequence of steps. And if you don't follow the sequence, you will make life difficult for yourself, completely unnecessarily.
Well, yeah, and you're right, because if you are running a business and you're starting a business, if you don't have income coming in, if you can't sell your product, there's no point in building a structure around it with a bunch of folks, and you can't sell the product. So you got to figure that out first, right?
Yeah, and I think the principle applies to everything in life. I mean, you say, for instance, recovering your health. If you are sick and then you say, I don't know, have a headache, or you have an allergy or whatever, for most people, the normal reaction, okay, they go to the physician, to the doctor, and say, oh, I have a headache, and then they get some pills or they get some medication. This is something that I think should be the second step. The first step, you should check your life and say, I am eating well, I am sleeping well. Is there any problem with my lifestyle that is creating this headache? And try to solve it. If the problem, I'm talking about problems that are not critical, try to find changes in your lifestyle that prevent these conditions. If you just go to the step 2 and go to the doctor and say, they will give you some medication, but most of the time you might be overlooking the root cause of the problem. And this is why I make so much emphasis on the step. Try to focus on the real problem, on the root problem, on the critical point, on the bottleneck. If you do not follow the right steps, you might go to step 3 or 4, and in 2 years from now, you will discover that you have not solved the problem. You have only minimized the symptoms, but the problem is still there.
Absolutely. Now, you've got a book that you just put out, and that's this year's edition, which is Asymmetry. Is that right?
Yeah, Asymmetry. The idea in this book is that in life, very few people become successful or become famous or become happy in a symmetrical way. And symmetrical, I mean, imagine that you have a life and you say, I'm going to split my day in 3 blocks, and I'm going to sleep 8 hours, I'm going to work 8 hours, I'm going to have 8 hours of leisure. This kind of symmetric mathematical approach, I have not seen any example in history where people make decisions in a symmetrical way and they work. When you see biographies and you see people who become very successful, very happy, 99%, I would say almost 100%, they have an asymmetric approach, which means that they are doing a lot of one thing or a lot of 2 or 3 things, and they are completely disregarding other areas. They are becoming very asymmetrical in their relationships, in their business, and this is the way it works. And it's a fact of life. And this book, I think the examples I provide, I think they're very compelling. You should not fool yourself by listening to people who are proposing you a perfectly balanced life, a perfectly harmonious life. I have not seen any example in history of people becoming happy this way or becoming successful. It's all about asymmetry. It's finding what you like, to pursue what you like, to try to minimize what you don't like, and to become as asymmetrical as possible. If you try to become perfectly organized and doing a little bit of everything, eventually you will just waste your life because you will not get anything done.
So it's more important that you kind of step out and because like you say in the book, the short term to success, when success seems impossible, is by doing it a little bit differently than most people do, right?
Yeah, you have to become asymmetrical in the sense that you have to find what works and what doesn't work and eventually pursue it. Let me just give you an example from the book. I think it will make the idea more clear. When you look at the newspapers and you look at, you listen to the radio and you see people who are successful, and you hear a story. And the story, most of the time, is going to be a lie, because they will tell you, oh, you know, I wrote this book, and then I became a best-selling author, and then I became a millionaire. That's it. And you see, for instance, this famous author, Dale Carnegie, who wrote books about personal development, like how to influence people and this kind of stuff. Or right. I mean, this guy, when you look at the story, it looks perfectly symmetrical, perfectly harmonious, and it's nonsense. You look at his biography, and the guy, first he was a salesman, and he failed. Then he wanted to be an actor, and he was in this academy of dramatic arts, and he failed to land a role. Then he became a teacher, and eventually he wrote a book after going through 20 different ways. And his career is perfectly asymmetrical. Eventually, he found a market where he could actually apply his talents, and then he became very successful. But it took him 20 years. 20 years. And you should not pay attention to these fantasies of symmetry, these fantasies of predictability, because this is not how life works. Nobody becomes successful or happy like this. It's a pure fantasy. It's a fantasy for a movie. And if you believe this fantasy, you will become very frustrated and very depressed because your expectations will be totally unrealistic. Look at the real stories. Look at the real people, how they become happy and successful. And I can tell you from the research for this book that the stories, they are all asymmetrical.
Well, and then I love the fact that you're going back through history and you're finding folks both on either side of the argument, and so that you can present their case studies of how they responded to life and some were successful and some were not. I love that you can point to history that way.
Yes, what is difficult is to actually apply a principle from maybe 2,000 years ago to today. Because when people go to school, children or teenagers go to school, they usually hate history because it's so boring and they don't see any use of learning about ancient Greece. I have a completely different approach. I look at history as a teacher, as a way to make my life better, as a way to prevent mistakes. When I look at the biography, for instance, the biography of Hannibal. Hannibal was a Roman, Carthaginian general. He was very successful because he actually had a lot of victories against Rome, and Rome was the greatest military power. You can say, oh, it's a story about ancient Rome. Who cares? Well, it's very interesting because you see this guy with a very small, relatively small army compared to the Romans. He was able to win all the time, almost all the time, with fewer soldiers, far away from his home base. And how did he do it? He did it by by deploying his forces in an asymmetrical way, using the territory and using the sunshine and using the wind to actually confuse the enemy, and was able to win victories with few resources. And many people today, they become depressed because they don't have resources, they don't have money, they don't have savings. But still, when you look at history and you see these examples like Hannibal, you see that you can still win if you deploy your resources. Even if there are few resources, you can still win if you deploy your resources or your skills in an optimal way, which is what we learn from Hannibal, from history, that it has been done before. It has not been done in the way you have to do it today in your own life, because you have to apply the principle, but the principle is true. If you apply your resources in an optimal way, asymmetrical way, you can multiply your success. And this is, for me, a fact that is proven by history.
You know, for those that don't enjoy history or don't want to learn from it or participate with it, we're doomed to repeat it. If you don't remember what we've done before to cause trouble, you're not going to remember what we're doing now to cause trouble. So it really is helpful if you are a student of history, don't you think? Well, you are, so that's great.
Yeah, especially people become very depressed when they don't have perspective. Because if you see, imagine you get the news, and the negative news, these days, sometimes it's all negative. And you see the news and it seems, the world is coming to an end, and people are losing their jobs. And it's very depressing. But you have to look at history. You have to look at how these situations have been solved in the past, and how people have survived, and how people rebuild their lives and rebuild their business very successfully. If you don't have this perspective and you don't see the examples from history, it's very easy to get depressed, because we look short term, we look at today, we look at next week, we cannot see the light at the end of the tunnel. And this is why I think it's essential to look at biographies of people from different centuries, from different countries, from different professions, because you learn the principles and you become more effective. But if you don't make the effort to learn from history, you will learn from mistakes, and this is very expensive.
You know, John, I'm looking at your book and all of the books that you have, all 11 of them, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I like what you're saying. I think that rationality is the way to happiness, and it can be something that would be really cool to understand completely. Do you recommend reading them in any particular order?
I think for most people, the first book they should read is this, the 10 Principles of Rational Living, because it's very, I think it's very much condensed. I think it's the main ideas that I draw from history. And the other books, what they are doing is to touch on specific aspects. For instance, there is one book about stress, and gives you very controversial strategies for reducing stress. But this is a very specific book. If you want to get a general introduction to this philosophy, I think the best book to read is The 10 Principles of Rational Living.
Very good. And that one is, and you can get them on Kindle, and they're all over Amazon. I assume they're in regular booksellers as well.
Yes, some booksellers, not all of them, because many are closed already. I mean, they are in the lockdown, but they are very easy to find. I mean, if you type my books or my name in Google, you can find the books in many places. They are very, very easy to find.
As well as a good marketeer should, your name is real easy to find on the internet. So, by the way, that name is John Vespasian, and then it's Vespasian. Do you have a website that we can reference as well?
Yes, I have a blog. There are hundreds of articles. You just type John Vespasian on the internet, you will find everything in 1 second. It's super easy to find.
You like to write, don't you? Because you're writing the books. You write a blog on a what appears to be a regular basis. You like to write.
Yes, I do, but I always have the frustration that I'm too slow. I have to say, my dream would be to go from 1 book a year to 4 books a year, to become so efficient and so fluent in my writing that I could just write it the first time and that's it. I'm getting better. I think every book is a bit better. I'm a bit faster every time. I think the quality is getting better and better, but I still feel too slow. I think that in a couple of years, I will be able to write at least 2 books per year. But there is always this ambition to become better, to become faster. There is a learning curve. I mean, I'm doing the best I can, but there is still room for improvement.
But you're learning and you're applying your own wisdom to your own career, which is pretty cool. Some people write books and they don't particularly believe what they've written.
Yes, I try to remind myself every day that you have to go through a learning process. You have to try to remember the principles and apply them. And for this reason, I've become very disciplined, very self-disciplined. And this is one of the messages you get in my books, is that you have to acquire habits that actually promote your goals, habits that help you achieve your goals every day. So you don't really have to think what I'm going to do now or what is the answer. If you get the habits every day and you just follow the habits, you just go to the goals naturally. For instance, one of the habits I acquired already a long time ago is to make a list of things I want to do, I'm going to do. I mean, it's a very simple to-do list that I split in the different areas. I copy this list by hand every 2 or 3 days, and I just cross out the tasks or the things I've done, and then I go to the next one. And it's a very simple habit, but many people don't do it. Many people just rely on their memory or rely on their computer or I have to write it by hand, because you think when you write, you have to think whether what you're writing makes sense or not. And it takes me 5 minutes to do that. I do it every few days. It takes 5 minutes. But I have to tell you, you become so efficient by knowing exactly what you have to do, by not having to hesitate. What is you just do every day 2 or 3 points in your list. You just do them, and the day is productive. It's very easy, but I have to tell you, it requires a bit of discipline. And this is the kind of approach I recommend to become automatically successful, to become a bit rational, a bit more rational every day, just by using habits that promote your goals.
We've been talking with John Vespasian, and he is the author of 11 books about rational living and about attaining your goals and working through the disasters that a lot of us have in life, and working and staying focused and following your heart and leading the best life that you can. And John, it's been great talking with you today. And I'd like to give the guest of the hour the opportunity to talk to our audience. Anything that you would like to tell our audience at all, sir?
Yes, I want to pass the message to people. Don't go crazy. Don't get depressed in this situation today. I know it's very difficult. I mean, it's easy to say, it's difficult to do, but try to look at the future. I mean, you have decades normally ahead of you. You are going to live many years. You have still the possibility to rebuild your business, to rebuild your life, to develop in many areas. Don't concentrate on the annoyance today. Look at the future. Try to develop your skills. Use your time wisely, and you will become successful. You will become healthier. You become successful. But don't go crazy. Don't get depressed. You are not doing yourself a service. On the contrary, don't focus on the short term. Try to look ahead. Think in terms of a lifetime. You are going to become 90 years old, 95 years old. Think in terms of a lifetime, and you will become much more relaxed and much more successful.
And we've been talking with John Vespasian, and that spell the last name again is Vespasian, and just Google him, and he pops right up there because he's got 11 books, and I would recommend them highly to that if you're interested in attaining your goals and really working towards whatever it is that you'd like to do in life. I think this will help you a great deal. John, before you go, do you find that in the response that you've gotten from your books, do you find that people find success?
Yes, I get emails and feedback from readers very often. I get the feedback that the books are easy to read, but you need discipline to implement the principles. And I recognize that. I mean, I'm not promising any magical solution, but what I have to tell you, even if you just pick up one idea from a book, even one idea, and you apply it consistently, it will improve your life. Even if it's only 1%, even if it's only 2%, in the long term, the difference is huge. The difference is huge, even a little improvement. And every book has 20, 30 different ideas. Pick up one, implement it, and you will see the results for yourself. Make a test. As I always say, make a test and then see the results for yourself.
Well, that's awesome. And by the way, we've been talking again with John Vespasian, Vespasian, and he is an author of 11 books that are all about really positive living and attaining your goals. So I hope that you'll go get that and go to Amazon, and they're all right there. And I would get the one that John recommended, the 10 I don't have it in front of me, John. Which is it again?
10 Principles of Rational Living.
There it is, the 10 Principles of Rational Living. Start with that one, and then he breaks it down with stress relief and rational working and all kinds of different stuff. So look at that, and I think that you'll enjoy it. And John, I'd like to thank you for being on the show today.
Many thanks, Kevin.
And you have yourself a wonderful day, sir. And with that, by the way, if you like this episode, if you like this podcast, please subscribe. That would be awesome, and we can continue to grow. So with that, thank you, everybody, for being here. And hey, and thanks for listening to this episode all the way to the end. Hey, pretty cool. Hey, don't forget to follow us so you can receive regular updates and new posts. And remember, take care of each other because each other's all we've got. See you next time on My Independence Report.